Good morning, Xavier basketball fans. The RaGing X Report is here. Everything about Xavier basketball. And I did say good morning. It is New Year's Eve morning. Changed our time up a little bit again to deal with the holiday, which kind of starts tonight, leading into tomorrow. Xavier Musketeers had one game. They defeated the DePaul Blue Demons on the road with a decisive 9-point victory. And here to help me talk about Xavier basketball is Bill Gabriel. Happy New Year. Bill, how are things with you this morning?
Oh, they're great, Jim. Happy New Year to you, too.
So we could say it. We'll say it because I don't know how many times we'll be able to say it, but Musketeers in first place in the Big East with that first victory. And got to feel good about it, a victory on the road. Again, maybe not the biggest power in the Big East, but we've talked about that. I think the words we've used, bloodbath. It could be anybody. It's going to be such a dogfight. I think a lot of teams are going to be very, very close, and so it's good to get a victory on the road. Let's talk about the win at DePaul. What were the key things you saw there? What were you happy with? Did we see improvement in any areas that we've talked about previously?
Well, I think, just individual performances. There are some big performances by the Xavier Musketeers, who are led by Najee Marshall. He had, I thought, just one of his best all-around games, both offensively and defensively. He led team with 19 points, had 14 rebounds, 4 assists, and still had 4 turnovers, though, which is a few too many. But as long as they're, when it comes to turnovers, there's bad and worse. And as long as they're not the worst kind that lead to the other team getting immediate points, they're at least survivable, which the Muskies were able to do. And then, Ryan Wellage was huge. 17 points, 5 for 8 from 3. And then, not early in the game, but definitely second half, Tyreek Jones came to play. He finished with 13 points, had big steal that helped seal the game. So those are some huge things individually from the Muskies in the game. Team-wise, they were 18 for 22 from the free throw line, which is awesome, and they shot 38.5% from 3 as a team, which is huge for a road victory. Defensively, I thought they did a great job limiting Max Strus to, I think it was 10 points. And then they did not let their point guard get rolling either, Devin Gage. They held him to 4 points. Other than that, they got beat up a little bit down low by Paul Reed and Jalen Butts, who combined for 33 points. So they're going to need to be a little bit better in their post defense in the future. But all in all, they held DePaul to 40% from the field, 21% from the three-point line, so it's a pretty solid team performance by the Musketeers.
Yeah, a lot of points you make there that I totally agree with. Yeah, Najee had a big game. Did have the 4 turnovers, but I guess we maybe got to say, hey, we can live with 4 turnovers. We're getting 19 points and 14 rebounds from him every night. Again, in my estimation, he handles the ball a little bit more than he should. But again, I think we started to see a little bit of what we expected out of Najee. I think we both thought he was going to be maybe the next superstar at Xavier, and has had a rough go. I think he was sick for a while there. He's been injured a little bit, had some back problems, didn't play against Detroit. But yeah, it was good to see Najee take the ball to the hoop a lot of times, which he's very good at. And, again, he's not shooting real well from 3, but he hit a big 3 in that run. And let's talk about that run. About 5 minutes left in the game. Musketeers are in their biggest deficit. They're down by 6. I got a little bit worried. How about you? And what do you think? What was the difference there? What changed the tide of that game at that point?
Well, I think, if I'm recalling this right, I think at some point in that time frame, I think that Max Strus picked up his 4th foul, which really kind of he could be aggressive offensively. or his third foul, I think it was, maybe. Take that back. But it limited him because he couldn't afford to pick up his fourth and fifth fouls, on the offensive end, if I can remember that sequence right. And they got Paul Reed in foul trouble, and I think that helped them out a lot too. Their aggressiveness in going to the rim just really put DePaul in a bind, and they had to foul or give up easy baskets. And I just think staying aggressive. And, of course, it also helps that, you have somebody hit two huge threes in that sequence. Ryan Welledge did, as well as Najee Marshall hit one, and that right after that they got that 6-point lead. So I think, hitting those three-pointers is huge in those moments.
Yeah, and to add to, I believe Paul Scruggs had a three from the corner in that run. They also, if you recall, they went to the zone defense, and Travis Steele said the reason they did that, number one, Quentin had picked up his fourth foul, so he wanted to try to protect him. And also at the time, Strus was not on the floor because he was in foul trouble too. They'd sat him down, and he thought that was a good time to go to the zone because he felt without Strus, they didn't really have any outside shooting threats. And I thought that was a big move, and I think that's going to have to be something the Musketeers are going to have to tinker with. I think, throwing different defenses at their opponent, especially in times like that where DePaul was kind of on a run themselves, is what they're going to have to do to try to, change the momentum of the game. It worked, obviously, very, very well. For me, another key stat, of course, is the turnovers. Overall, the Musketeers only had 11. I'm always like this, was try to keep it below 10. And Ryan Welledge, we got to have that out of him. He's got to be a threat from 3 points. He is their best 3-point shooter, I believe. Actually, Scruggs leads him a little bit. He's shooting 46. Welledge is shooting 44. But I think a telling point of the game is when, I don't know if you recall, sometime in that second half, when he had a wide open three and he passed it up, and Najee kind of looked at him like, hey, you're out here to shoot the ball. If you're open, shoot the ball if you're open, which was good. I think Najee needs to start to become kind of a leader again. He's had a rough go at the start of this season, but he's getting hopefully into his stride at the right time. Other question I have for you is, does Quentin Gooden need to maybe not shoot as much? He was only 2 for 10, and he was shooting a lot of jump shots. We've talked about before, Quentin's, I think, best when he's going toward the basket, trying to go down low. Does he need to limit his attempts, or does he need to keep firing it up, especially when teams maybe drop into zones and give him the open three?
I think Quentin can continue to shoot three-pointers as long as they're the good three-pointers, which are the catch-and-shoot variety. When your feet are set, you can take, you gather yourself, shoot the ball in rhythm. I think when he takes those three-pointers, he's a pretty good three-point shooter. I think he took about 3 or 4 dribble pull-up three-pointers, and those are the ones that he and a lot of the rest of the Musketeers are not. That's not their game. They're not great dribble into their shot shooters. So if he doesn't take those 3 or 4, I can't remember exactly how many he had, that's going to, that helps his percentage look a little better. And maybe just be make a pass to get another pass to get somebody open, or get the ball back in a better spot for him to take a shot. But he's got to shoot them. Maybe not the kind where he dribbles into them and attempts to shoot, but he did have 8 assists, which that was a really a good stat to have for all those open teammates, and that's what you want out of your point guard.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, because my recollection was a lot of those threes he took, and I think one of them missed everything. Early in the shot clock, just kind of came down, was kind of, maybe got a quick ball screen at the top of the key or something. But, I think he needs to, look to pass first and shoot second, and again, try to you're right. He's going to have to hit him, and we've seen him hit him before. I think he worked on his shot a lot. I think he was expecting to do better shooting outside this year than he has in the past. But again, you can shoot all the three-pointers in the gym by yourself all summer long, but until you got people flying at you and the pressure of the game, I think it maybe will come. That if we start to see him hit some, then of course that's going to make him even more dangerous because he can, then take his guy to the bucket if they have to guard him out there. Any other thoughts about just again a big win and just to remind you, last year's team, of course, great team, number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Their 2 victories over DePaul last year were by 5 points at home and by only 3 points up there last year. So, and this was, I think, most people think is an improved DePaul team, and look for them to maybe win a few more games in the Big East. So you have to be very happy with the takeaway. Again, let's enjoy it. 1-0, tied for first with Seton Hall, who actually won a game that day also. So any other thoughts about the DePaul game? Any other takeaways? Kind of looking at my notes. Well, the question, and I think here one last question, get your opinion on this. Zach Hankins started. Now, I believe that's probably because I don't think Tariq practiced much up before this game, and in fact, he took himself out of the game there, I believe, in the second half because he was a little bit winded. But what's your thoughts about Tariq starting, Zach Hankins starting? Doesn't matter. I mean, they're playing about average 20 minutes each. They're probably both going to continue to play a lot. Do you think it's important who starts, and who do you think's better on the defensive end between those two?
Well, I think I think team chemistry standpoint, I think Tyreek probably continues to start just because I think he's kind of the been there guy. He may be a bit better on the man defender, especially against a stronger, strong post player because of his strength. Down low, I've seen times where Hankins can kind of get bulled a little bit to the basket by a strong low post player. But the off the ball, I think Zach's a better defender because he does have some good quickness and his shot blocking abilities, not necessarily on the guy he's guarding, but coming off and being that secondary defender. So they kind of bring two different things to the table in those regards. And I think the same's true of their offensive game. They're a little different. And so, it doesn't truly matter which one of them starts as long as it keeps the team chemistry rolling and, they're in their roles and they understand what they're going to do when they're in there and the team knows how to work with them each in their different ways is really what it boils down to.
Yeah, and, you look at the position as a 20 points, and I believe between the two of them they were like 7 for 8 from the free throw line. Again, as a team, they shot 81%. You got to like that. But, the big men going down low and getting fouled and being able to knock down those free throws was key because actually DePaul hit their free throws very well also. That wasn't a factor that really gave us a key advantage because I don't know if I have it down, but their percentage actually might have been a little bit higher. They didn't miss either. In fact, I remember at one point I think they had hit 13 or 14 in a row. But again, you got to like the fact that between the two of them, they were knocking down free throws, and got to like the fact that they were going to the basket and getting fouled a lot. That's what I really like. I think this team has to do that. Again, might be a little bit offensively challenged at times and go through those runs where we've seen in other games where they can't stop. I recall the 17-0 run at Missouri, but I was very happy that they were taking the ball to the basket and getting fouled, and a lot of times that's how you get your offense going is shooting some of those free ones. All right, well, a good start to the season, the Big East season. Got to remember, we are defending champions. Sometimes people forget that. Everybody thinks Villanova won it last year, and we have to remind them that no, Villanova did not win the league last year. Yes, they did win the national championship, but the Musketeers are the defending Big East champions. All right, well, next game up will be Wednesday this week. It'll be the opening Big East home game at the Cintas Center at your favorite time, 6:30. But at least you won't have to worry about coming from work on this week, so shouldn't be so bad, right?
Shouldn't.
You had previewed Seton Hall for us in our Big East preview show last week. So can you kind of help the listeners recall or talk about the strong points and what the Musketeers need to do against Seton Hall on Wednesday?
Well, Seton Hall, they come into the game. They're averaging 75.5 points per game, shooting pretty well from the floor, about 45%. Their three-point shooting percentage is 32.4%, and they're shooting their free throws at about 71%. So they're definitely a pretty good offensive team. In their offensive scheme, they average just about 11 turnovers per game, which isn't bad. And their defensive scheme, they get about just below 7 steals a game, about 6.8. So, they're a really solid team. They're led by Miles Powell, who averages 22.5 points per game, and his average is 3 for 8 from 3-point range. So he is an outside shooter as well as able to take the ball and do other things with it. And then they have I'm going to butcher this name again. Sandro.
You say it before me.
Sandro Mamukelashvili. He averages about 12.3 points per game. They have an African-born player, Michael Nazii, something like that. He's 10.2 points per game. Quincy McKnight at 9.2, and Miles Kale at 9.2. And so they have a very solid team, and in their huge opening victory against St. John's, they really demonstrated their scoring balance. They had 4 players in double figures. Miles Powell had 15, and then Mamukelashvili, McKnight, and Nazii all had 14 points. So very solid effort. And then to kick it all off, they get the game-winning shot from a bench player named Reynolds, who averages 2.5 points per game, and he took that three-pointer like he'd been shooting them in those situations his entire life. So that's a good reminder that there's always going to be a wild card player coming in off the bench in these Big East games, and as you move forward into the tournament season. So the key, I think, to Xavier pulling off a home victory against Seton Hall is they're going to have to really limit Powell and his scoring and playmaking ability, really force others to make baskets in places they're not comfortable shooting. And if they can do that and have a solid offensive approach on their end, I think they can pull off the home victory.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, but I did watch the end clip of that game. Actually, they had in 3.9 seconds left in the game, had the ball on the side on their end of the court, threw a pass to their post player. Now, what I want to see on Wednesday is I want to see if that name fits on his jersey. But because there's a good, 10, 12, 13 letters in that name. McCullough, well, after watching some Big East games, we'll have the pronunciation down, hopefully. But anyway, they inbounded to him. He went across the lane, looked like he was going to try to maybe shoot a hook shot or take it to the bucket, but he was walled off. So he kicked it out to, Xavier Reynolds, who, again, is just a bench player, and he nailed it from 3 points. They didn't even need the 3 points to win the game. They were only down by 1, but that's where he took it from. And another thing that really surprised me. I was watching this game on a GameCast on ESPN because it was actually being played. I don't even know if it was on any television stations that we have access to here in Cincinnati. But I was watching on a GameCast and just kind of watching the score. And St. John's led by double digits. They were up by 14 at one point, but for much of the second half, as I was watching the score, they had pretty much a 10-point lead. And it's one of those things that you got to think maybe St. John's, maybe like DePaul, have had some rough times lately, just can't close games out, just don't know how to win yet is maybe what happened. Because the game was actually played at Seton Hall, which I kept thinking, man, St. John's, maybe they're for real if they can beat Seton Hall at Seton Hall, because I know we both picked Marquette last week as our champion, but then I said, well, let's go to a second team, and I picked Villanova, just going with the history. And you said Seton Hall, a team you had previewed. You thought they were the one that might be there. So, both things I take away from this game is both these teams might be pretty good. Got to remember also the Seton Hall team beat UK. I think that game was played in New York City, a neutral site, one of those games or doubleheaders they have. So, it's going to be – this is a big game for the Musketeers. If they're going to have any say, and, I think they got to finish in the top 4 or 5 to even get a sniff at going to the NCAA tournament, but they're going to have to try to hold serve on their home court, win at the Cintas Center, which, of course, they have a big advantage. I just look back. I didn't think Seton Hall would be this good. And think about who they lost last year. Angel Delgado, who I think led the country in rebounding. Kadeem Carrington, if you remember him, guy that could score. And Desi Rodriguez, another guy that could score. Seemed like they'd been around forever and won a lot of games for the Pirates. So, this is going to be a tough game. Any other thoughts about Wednesday's game, Big East opener with the Pirates?
I just hope that the Musketeers are ready for the challenge that's coming in, and they play well as a team.
Well, next I just wanted to look at, and I'm not sure. I'm sure it probably has something to do with, as everything, money and television. But it's really odd the way the Big East is starting out. You probably remember a few years ago, it was like they all played on New Year's Eve. And I kind of thought that was a cool thing. I think Fox Sports had almost like a running marathon all day as all 10 of the teams played 5 consecutive games throughout the day. But a really weird start to the season, the way it starts. In fact, there were 2 games on Saturday. Not everybody played. In fact, a couple of the teams, I know Georgetown, I watched them play a little bit, played Howard early afternoon. And there was another yesterday. Did you see Butler got hammered by Florida, 34 points on the road. And Florida, a team that they had beaten in a tournament somewhere back about a month ago. But one of my Indiana buddies, I was talking to him about it. He said, Butler not very good away from Hinkle. But today we have a game of interest, Creighton at Providence. And then tomorrow, this will be interesting, Marquette goes to St. John's. And then on Wednesday, of course, when the Musketeers kick it off, there's a couple other games. Georgetown at Butler. I was impressed with Georgetown. I think Georgetown is going to give the Musketeers some problems with Jesse Govan, the 6'10" postman, who's, again, coached by Patrick Ewing, who knows a little bit about playing in the post. And then we'll get a good sense of where we stand maybe with Villanova, because DePaul plays Villanova, although that game is at Villanova. And the one thing I looked up all those games on ESPN's Predictor, and the one thing common was the home teams were predicted to win in all of those 4 games. So it'll be interesting. I didn't look up the Seton Hall game, what they were predicting there, but, man, I just think the Big East is going to be – I think the home court's going to play a big role, and so that's why I think it's so important the Musketeers maybe get a big win against Seton Hall. on Wednesday. Any thoughts you have about all those games and why the Big East is doing what they did, or is it, again, do you think it's just TV and money?
Yeah, it's probably just TV and money for everything being broken up. I don't know what you don't know what the ratings are like when they did the marathon game and the marathon day where they started at noon and they had a game every 2 hours, which was awesome. But from a rating standpoint, you never know about that stuff with the networks. And it's just sometimes just the way it's scheduled. Some teams they like to keep playing 2 games a week, and so they probably had their schedule set up where they're like that. Or I think like Xavier has a run where they have just like 1 game a week in February, which may be good for them if they need to, recover some injury issues or stuff. It's probably preferences of the teams. I know Creighton Providence coming up. That's just basically a toss-up game. I don't know if there really is a favorite other than Providence being at home, but I think Creighton's better on the offensive end than Providence, so that could be something in their favor. The Marquette St. John's is huge. I think Marquette needs to go in there and get a road win in order to establish themselves as a team to beat in the Big East. And St. John's, obviously, they want to be in competition for that Big East championship, so they don't want to drop a home game and go to 0-2 in the Big East. That'd be a huge hole to try to overcome early in the season here. And then Georgetown, with Butler, I know it's at Butler, but I think Georgetown down low is just so dominant that they're going to give them a lot of problems. And then, Villanova should win at home against DePaul, unless, Struts gets hotter than heck from 3-point line.
Yeah, I kind of agree with all those takings. I think the key will be by Thursday of this week, I think we'll have a better feel of maybe we won't. Maybe it'll just be total chaos. Maybe couple of those teams get upset from who we think will win. But, yeah, that Marquette at St. John's, I think if Marquette can beat St. John's at St. John's, now I don't know where that game's played because a lot of times they play a lot of their games in Madison Square Garden, and that game being on New Year's Day, I got to think that's where that one's being played.
I believe it is.
Because sometimes they play a few games on campus in a smaller arena they have. But if Marquette can go to Market Square Arena and beat St. John's in front of probably what will be a loud, raucous hometown crowd, boy, I think you and I will look very smart in picking them as going to be the favorites for this league. Well, speaking of Marquette, that's the Musketeers' next opponent, which will be this coming Sunday. Still don't have a tip time on that game as of last night, although I'm hoping they'll have it today because I am going to the game. I want to know what time it is and how long it's going to take me to get back home that day from Milwaukee. I think with the NFL games maybe going to be set, the playoff games, I think that's what they were waiting on, and hopefully there'll be a tip time. I'm hoping for about a noon tip time. That would work best for me, but I'm sure they don't care. A little review of Marquette. Again, Bill and I both picked them to win the Big East last week in our Big East preview. Currently, they are ranked 18th in the country, standing at 11-2. These are the numbers that scare me. They're averaging just a tick under 80 points a game and only giving up a tick over 66, a 14-point differential in what they're scoring and what they're giving up. And that was the key. The previews I read, the big question was, could they play defense? Sometimes they become that offensive juggernaut that kind of almost like, okay, score so we can take the ball back down the court and score. Again, they're led by all Big East candidate Marcus Howard. He's averaging right at about 25 points a game right now with 4 assists, shooting 43% from the three-point line, shooting 91% from the free throw line, and he can just do it all. And then they got the Hauser brothers, 6'8", Sam Hauser, who's been one of their leading big men for the last few years, and now his brother, who's an inch taller than him, 6'9", Joey Hauser, is now starting also and averaging just under 10 points a game. And they are deep. They're playing 8, 9, 10 guys a game. Of course, they do play kind of an up tempo style, which is kind of interesting because Wojciechowski was, when he played for Duke, he was known for his defense. And again, that's one of the things that people question about them. In fact, in a lot of the previews, and I think this talk has kind of gone away, but there was a little bit of talk that he was maybe on the hot seat. Maybe, I think this is his 4th season, and he, really, I don't think they'd finished in the top of the Big East since he's been there, so people were starting to expect things to happen. Well, I think that talk's probably been limited a little bit with their start. Their only 2 losses was at IU, and that was really early on. I would guess if that game was played again and even on a neutral court, Marquette might be able to take them. And then they lost to Kansas, who has, flirted with being the number 1 team in the country all year, and that was at a neutral location. And I watched that game for some of it. I don't think I saw the end, but they actually had the Jayhawks down for a while. And they have, at this point, have a very good resume. They've beaten Louisville. They beat Kansas State. They beat Wisconsin. And last week they just thumped, although it was at home at Marquette, they thumped an undefeated Buffalo team by double digits. So this is going to be a big challenge. What do you see as the keys in this game for the Musketeers? I mean, if they could pull off this one, this might be their toughest challenge of the year, going to Milwaukee to play Marquette. How do they win it?
Well, they win it by limiting Marcus Howard, just making it really difficult on him to get an open look. And with their length and their guard and wing players' height, they should be able to do that. Whether or not they're successful in that is a different story. And then they got to keep the Howard brothers from establishing themselves down low. That they make them take shots a little further out than they're comfortable, or shots from areas of the floor they don't want to shoot from. They stand a chance, and I think that's what I see. As long as they continue to produce on the offensive end as they did against DePaul.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I've written down, just so you hit the first one right on the head. They can't let Marcus Howard beat him. He's had twice he's gone for 45 points, and once for 37. Again, he's averaging 25. Now I got to think that probably the initial assignment on him is going to be Quentin Gooden, and the fact Quentin has a 5-inch advantage on him, and probably is a little bit more physical. So maybe he can shut him down. He's done a very good job. I think he was the major factor in shutting Max Strus down. Although I did read somewhere that Strus maybe was a little bit banged up, has dealt with a knee injury, which has maybe limited his mobility a little bit, but maybe somebody was looking for an excuse for Quentin shutting him down on Saturday. But here's the other factor. I fear this, and I don't know if they can avoid this, but again, because Marquette is so deep, I think one of the things we're looking at the Musketeers right now, they're only 7, maybe 8 deep, is foul trouble, especially if Quentin is guarding Marcus Howard. He drives and does all kinds of things to create his own shots, and if Quentin gets in foul trouble, in fact, that's the Achilles heel. I probably shouldn't say this, but if I'm scouting Xavier and I want to beat Xavier, I think a key, and some teams will try to get him in foul trouble, because I think it's become very apparent if he doesn't play, although we've had a game or so too when he didn't play, but if he doesn't play, especially against a team like Marquette, or his minutes are limited in a game against a team like Marquette, I think the Musketeers are in big trouble, because I guess maybe Scruggs, I think we've actually seen Elias Harden even play a little bit of point guard. But actually at times, Najee's brought the ball up, I think, when Quentin hadn't been in the game. So that's the key right there. They got to stay out of foul trouble. if they can stay out of foul trouble and limit Marcus Howard, they maybe have a shot. But again, I'm going to say they're going to be, I'd say, an 8 to 10 point underdog probably by the experts in this game, especially in their Marquette's playing in their new arena. It's created a lot of energy and excitement up there. And again, I think they believe that maybe this is this year to get back to a Big East championship. Any other thoughts about the game at Marquette? Hopefully it's warm up there.
For your sake, I hope so. And the new arena is nice and toasty warm for you.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to trivia. And since I was, there was a few things I wanted to test your memory because I was thinking about New Year's Eve. You know, the Musketeers through the past 20 years or so have played some New Year's Eve games. In fact, you remember that the first Big East game that the Musketeers played ever, first ever, their opening game at Cintas in it would have been New Year's Eve 2013 or the eve of the 2014 year. Do you remember who they played that night in that first game? Actually, if I recall, New Year's actually came in while the game was still going on because it was like a 10 o'clock start. It was like the last game of that. We talked about that Big East Marathon. Do you remember who they played that night and won?
Was it Georgetown?
Nope.
No. I can't remember. It's been a while.
St. John's.
St. John's.
And they got their first Big East victory with a 70-60 win. Again, that game started at 10 o'clock and I think ended about 12:15, so it started in 2013, ended in 2014. And do you recall, I could not find I did a little bit of research this morning and I didn't have time to dig deep enough because it's going back farther than I care to remember. But do you remember the Creighton game on New Year's Eve back when David West was playing and Kyle Korver? Do you recall that game?
Oh, yeah, yes. David West and Kyle Korver went shot for shot.
Yep, Kyle Korver hit a shot with maybe 3 or 4 seconds or something, under 10 anyway, to put them up, and then Xavier called a timeout and came down, and David West hit a shot right at the buzzer, right before the buzzer, to seal the victory for the Musketeers. But I couldn't find when that game was played. I'm thinking it was probably West's senior year, maybe junior or senior year, and and David West has been out for, 15 years maybe?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah. I'm guessing it must have been about 2002, 3, 4. I don't know. I didn't go back that far. The source I was looking at only had the results back through 2008, and it wasn't in that period. And I started looking, and then I started thinking West and Korver, both of them, I think, are retired from the NBA now. So that was a while ago. So my trivia is, though, I'm going to deal with Marquette today. Marquette University, a university I'm very familiar with. I had older son attended and graduated from there, but going a little bit away from basketball. In 1909, Marquette University was the first first Catholic university to do what? 1909, they allowed something to happen that had never happened at a Catholic university before.
Would it be women to attend?
You got it. Ding, ding. They became the first co-ed Catholic university in America in 1909. Another trivia question I think I used with Jeff before is, do you know what the Marquette, what their mascot was? Before it was the Warriors, before it was the Golden Eagles, they started out with another name. You probably have no idea.
I do not.
The Hilltoppers. And, of course, you've been to Marquette University. It sits up on a hill about a mile out of downtown Milwaukee, so that's where that name came from. Also, Marquette, you may kind of along with Xavier, but not even as long, but up until 1960, Marquette actually had a football team. And actually Marquette and Xavier, I think, annually played during that time period when they both did have football teams. And, of course, now they are the Golden Eagles, although some people still refer to them as the Warriors. And your last trivia, I'm just on a roll today, 1977, they were national basketball champions under the direction of what famous coach?
Oh,
Al.
It's right there on the tip of my tongue. I cannot think of it.
Al McGuire.
McGuire, yep.
Actually, if you look at the Marquette uniforms, when you watch them play, they still pay tribute to him. They have the name Al is on the front of the uniform, just a little AL up in the top hand corner. Well, Bill, we will not be watching the Musketeers on this New Year's Eve. We have to wait till January 2nd, but let's hope that this Big East streak continues. Again, big game. Any final thoughts before we sign off today?
Nothing that I can think of, Jim.
All right, so we finish by saying, go Muskies.
Go Muskies.